Hello, friends, and welcome to Escaping the Mouse with your host, me, Breck Roll. All right, I just finished up eating my eggs from that I made yesterday on the video, and now I'm getting ready to do today's video. Now, this is a video that I actually became aware of this story about a month or so ago when I visited the Oakwood Cemetery. That's the cemetery that had the grave of the inventor of the Dr. Pepper drink. There was another grave I was looking for at the time, and I spent probably an hour out there trying to find it and could not find it. Well, it turns out I was looking out in the wrong place. So now I know where the right place is, and I know kind of the rest of the story. And this is a really interesting story about a man named William Cowper Braun. William Braun was a publisher and writer of a magazine in the 1890s called The Iconoclast. And let's just say he was not a huge fan of Baptists or Baylor University. And he savaged them in his magazine. Well, it turns out his words resulted in a series of gunfights over about a 5-month period that resulted in 5 people, including himself, dying. So today we're going to go find the locations where the gunfights occurred, and we're also going to visit the graves of 4 of the 5 people. So let's go. This is going to be kind of an interesting piece of Waco history. So the longer I live here, the more astounded I am at how many different things happened right in this location. This is the location. This is 4th and Austin. The corner where the monument is for that tornado that hit here in 1953. We're also at the corner where Dr. Pepper was invented. This is Austin Avenue, which is where that Veterans Day parade came down just a few days ago. That's the City Hall building right there where Jesse Washington was lynched. And then we have this incident right here. It's commemorated by this marker. So I'll just read what the plaque says here because, this kind of tells the whole story. Gerald Harris shooting, November 19th, 1897. James W. Harris, 1863 to 1897, editor of Waco's Times Herald, and Judge George Bruce Gerard, 1836 to 1914, argued over an article that the judge had written. It supported William Cowper Braun's controversial magazine, The Iconoclast, which denounced, among other things, Baptists and Baylor University. After a fistfight, which Harris won, the judge distributed a handbill branding Harris a liar, a coward, and a cur, and challenged him to a duel. James Harris and his brother William met Judge Gerald near this intersection in a pistol battle. Both the Harrises were killed, and the judge was wounded. Judge Gerald won re-election in 1900. Yeah, so that all happened here, right here at this intersection, 4th and Austin. So yeah, right here there was a shooting right in the shadow of the City Hall building, and the courthouse where obviously Judge Gerald worked is right over here. You really can't see it through the trees, but trust me, it's there. So I found a newspaper article that specifically discussed the shooting between Harris and Judge Gerald that took place in this intersection right here. And basically it started on October 2nd, a couple weeks before the shooting took place. William Cowper Braun had been mobbed by a group of Baylor students who were angry about his articles. And shortly after that, Judge Gerald wrote an editorial supporting Braun for the Times Herald newspaper. Now, the editor, James Harris, refused to publish it, and this made Judge Gerald very, very angry. And so what he did is he went back and he demanded that the manuscript be returned, and James refused. Now, James Harris and Judge Gerald, James was 34 years old and Judge Gerald was 62. They got into a fist fight, and needless to say, James Harris won. Shortly after that, Judge Gerald circulated a flyer around town calling James Harris a liar, a coward, and a cur, and he challenged him to a duel. And it all kind of culminated right here. Now, according to the story, Judge Gerald on October 19th was crossing Austin diagonally here at this intersection. Now, it said specifically that James Harris was on the opposite corner in a corner drugstore. Now, I made an interesting connection because this intersection here is the intersection where Dr. Pepper was first served in a corner drugstore. And the drugstore was here in 1895. So it's very possible that the same drugstore that Dr. Pepper was invented in, that, that's where James Harris was shooting, was standing by waiting when he saw Gerald, which would mean that Judge Gerald was coming across this intersection from the old Roosevelt Hotel there. Okay, so anyway, on October 19th, Judge Gerald crossed Austin diagonally, possibly to this very corner that we're on now, and James Harris was in the drugstore where we're standing right now. Possibly, I don't know. It's possible there was another drugstore there. It's possible there's another drugstore on that corner. But this is the Roosevelt Hotel, and the Roosevelt Hotel was opened in 1872. So it definitely wasn't on that corner. So I'm just speculating, but it's very possible that this is the corner right here where that drugstore was. James Harris saw Judge Gerald coming across the street, and he drew his pistol and fired on him first. Judge Gerald unbuttoned his overcoat, drew his pistol, and began charging towards James Harris, returning fire. James Harris was supposedly struck twice, severing his windpipe and his spinal cord, paralyzing him. William Harris, James's older brother, was on an opposite corner, either here or here, in a bank. I'm not sure which. I haven't been able to figure that out. And he saw what was happening. He was in front of the Citizens National Bank, and he saw the shooting, and he began shooting at Judge Gerald, hitting him twice, wounding him in the side and shattering his arm. Judge Gerald returned fire. A police officer tried to keep the two separated and disarmed William, but Judge Gerald walked up to William Harrison and shot him 3 times, exclaiming, "You blankety blank, you shot me in the back." William Harris died instantly, and the judge walked away bleeding with his shattered arm swinging by his side. Later he found a police officer and offered to surrender. He said, "They laid for me, but I got them both. That is, I think I did." Now, like I said, I'm speculating about where the drugstore was. It could have been there. It could have been here. But the fact that there was a drugstore here, and remember, this is more than 100 years ago. So there weren't really that many people in town. Remember, there were only about 30,000 people 20 years later during the Jesse Washington lynching. So how many drugstores could there possibly have been on this corner? So it's very, very possible that the same corner where Dr. Pepper was first served is where James Harris waited and ultimately died, and right in the front doorway, which would have been literally right here. So I don't know. Like I said, it's like I said earlier, it's interesting how many things have happened right here in this one little area. Now, this wasn't the end, because about 4 months later, the judge was gunned down right over there by an irate Baptist. And let's go over there and I'll tell you that story. All right, so you look down there, that is the corner of Austin and 4th that where the first part of the gun battle happened. And now we're half a block away, and there's another monument right here. And this one talks about the Braun Davis shooting. The city of Waco in the 1890s divided into 2 armed camps over the caustic criticisms of William Cowper Braun. And in his magazine, The Iconoclast, the gifted writer Braun attacked many organizations, especially Baptists and Baylor University. This controversy sparked a duel in 1897 between Judge George Bruce Gerald and James W. Harris, a Baylor partisan. Tom E. Davis met Braun here within a half block of the earlier fight and shot him with a Colt 45 revolver. Braun returned fire. Both men died the following day from their wounds. So yeah, that happened right here. Like I said, literally just half a block from the original shooting. So yeah, this is a funny little town I chose to move into, huh? So much history just right here. Like I said, I first heard about this story when I was at Oakwood Cemetery looking up the grave of the Dr. Pepper creator. And I was unable to find the grave because I got the block and the plot numbers mixed up. So I was looking in the wrong section of the grave. So when I looked closer at the map, I realized exactly what happened and why I was wrong and why I couldn't find anything. But when I was doing research for the Jesse Washington story a couple weeks ago, I came across that first marker and I said, oh, this is where that happened. And so I started looking into that, and yeah, here we are. And here are the Kinetic Sculptures again, just to kind of put everything into perspective, you know. That's the tornado memorial over there. The Alico building, which survived. You know, I keep telling this every time I'm here because there's just so much that happened here. And then the tornado blew right through here. All right, so here we are back at the Oakwood Cemetery. This is where, like I said, 4 of the 5 people who died in this story are all buried. So let's go in and look around. Now that I know where to find Mr. Braun, you know, we'll probably have better luck this time. All right, so this is the grave of the man who kind of started it all, William Cowper Braun. It doesn't even actually say his name on the marker. It's just got the profile on the front and his initials WCB in the back. But this is a man who was the publisher and writer for the magazine in the 1890s called The Iconoclast. And as I mentioned, he hated Baptists, and he hated Baylor University too, because that was a Baptist organization. And he wrote repeatedly how much he hated them and detested them. And basically what ended up happening, what the papers describe as an irate Baptist, shot him. And while he lay dying in the street, he pointed his gun at the guy who shot him and shot him also. And so both of them ended up dying the next day. So I haven't been able to find out where Tom Davis is buried, but the other 4 are here in this cemetery. So we're going to go check them out also. Now, allegedly, on the night that this marker was erected, somebody fired 2 bullets into the marker itself, which are supposedly still visible. Now, I'm not sure, because there used to be something on top of the marker, and I'll show a picture of what it used to look like. So I'm not sure if when they said it was still visible, if it was in the bottom part of the marker or if it was in the part that was removed. But it's entirely possible that this mark right here is a bullet hole, and I don't know where the other one is, because you know, the rest of it just looks like a normal marker, and I don't see any holes on the rest of the grave that could be a bullet hole. But you gotta remember, this thing's been here about 100 years now. So all right, here we are at the grave of Judge George Bruce Gerard. He was actually the only person directly involved in this incident that actually survived it. He had gotten in a fight with a gentleman named George W. Harris, who was a writer for the Waco Tribune Herald at the time, and he'd gotten in a fist fight with him. And since James Harris was much younger than him, James kicked his butt. Well, he was very incensed about that and started passing out flyers calling James Harris a liar and a coward and a cur. At some point, challenged him to a duel, and both James and his brother William showed up at the duel. Gerald shot and killed both of them right there in the street in downtown Waco. All right, here's the graves of James and William Harris. They're the 2 men that were gunned down by Judge Gerard on November 19th, 1897. James was the one that had gotten into a fist fight with the judge, and The judge basically, like I said, had his butt handed to him because the judge was in his mid-60s and James was 34 years old. And a couple days later, the brothers were challenged to a duel by the judge. James brought his brother William along, and they tried to ambush the judge, but the judge took both of them. And William died that day, and James died the next day. Now, I know I've only done a couple stories really diving into the history of this city that I've chosen to live in, but when I am doing them, what I'm trying to do is do my best to be objective and also tell stories that maybe haven't been told a whole lot. When I first started researching this story, the first article I came across was an article written by a guy about 10 years ago who was a journalist for the Waco Tribune. Now, the newspaper that James Harris worked for later turned into the Waco Tribune. So this guy posted a really kind of a sarcastic story about it, and he seemed more interested in complaining about the fact that somebody had assassinated a journalist, and he got a plaque for it, and he seemed to be really bothered about that, and really glossed over a lot of the details, trying to paint this James Harris individual as just being a saint that had just fallen prey to some deranged judge that had lost his mind. But it seems to me that James Harris was sort of the instigator in much of this. He really started everything. He was the one that refused to print Judge Gerald's editorial. He was the one that refused to return the manuscript to him. He then proceeded to beat the living snot out of a guy who was 30 years his senior. Remember that James Harris was 34 and Judge Gerald was 62. He then, after being challenged to a duel, cowardly shot first before the judge even knew he was there, and had his brother providing backup to shoot him in the back. So, I mean, he's hardly a saint in any of this. Now, I'm not saying that Judge Gerald is either. They both deserve to be condemned for what happened. But, like I said, both sides there's plenty of blame to go around for both sides. So, like I said, this was an interesting little piece of history for my town. I keep digging up all these new things that are happening here, and it's really interesting to learn about my new town, warts and all. So anyway, I think that's all I really have to talk about tonight. So I hope you enjoyed this. Thank you as always for watching, and I will see you next time on Escaping the Mouse. Good night.